Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For those that aren't aware, me, Asadullah, Yusuf Ponders, and Emin have made a video dissecting Abdullah Samir's viral video where he speaks about his reasons for leaving Islam. Now, Abdullah Samir, a couple days later, responded, and that was yesterday, and wow, I was surprised to see Asadullah and Emin both come out with their video responses immediately after. They beat me to the punch. I can't let them have all the fun. Here's my video response.
In reality, I spent weeks researching this when I was in a doubting phase.
And this is what frustrates me about Abdullah Samir. He's extremely incompetent and yet forces himself to talk about matters that he's simply not qualified to talk about. I'm going to be demonstrating that in this video.
In order to try to resolve some of the issues in the story that conflict with reason and evidence, Farid says that the concept of Yajuj and Majuj digging every day and trying to get out is a weak hadith in Ibn Majah.
And this idea, this concept of Gog and Magog digging every single night in order to get out to the rest of the world, to incur their wrath upon the people of the world. That's based on a weak hadith that's been attributed to Abi Hurairah, I believe in Sunan Tirmidhi.
The hadith states, Gog and Magog people dig every day until when they can almost see the rays of the sun, the one in charge of them says, go back and we will dig it tomorrow. Then Allah puts it back stronger than it was before. This will continue until when the time has come and Allah wants to send them against the people. They will dig until they can almost see the rays of the sun. Then the one who is in charge of them will say, go back and we will dig tomorrow, inshallah. So when they say inshallah, they're going to escape and they're going to get out and they're going to swim. This hadith is actually a Sahih hadith according to Ibn Majah.
La. Ibn Majah didn't grade this hadith, Samir. You'd know that if you were competent enough to check the original source.
I'm not sure who recorded it as weak. But anyways, sure, throw out the hadith if you want, Farid. Ibn Majah is not considered as strong as Bukhari, I agree. But it is considered one of the authentic Sunni collections.
Referring to Ibn Majah's Sunan as one of the 6 authentic collections seems to have led Samir to assume that Ibn Majah only quotes what he deems to be authentic, which is another misconception. In any case, for a breakdown of the hadith and its authenticity, I strongly suggest checking out this fascinating article by Hakim al-Mtayri on the subject.
So why even bring up this hadith as weak anyways? Why you even mention this? Because it causes problems.
Well, Samir, I'm only going out of my way to mention this because folks like yourself are looking for Gog and Magog on Google Maps, assuming they'd find a wall. There is no reason to assume that a wall still exists unless you believe in reports like the previous one that explicitly states that it will only collapse at the end of times. But let's carry on to Samir's next point, where he attempts to prove that Al-Qarnayn is Alexander the Great in order to refute the Quran.
In reality, I spent weeks researching this when I was in a doubting phase. Al-Qarnayn really undoes Islam like no other topic.
Yalla, we'll see how the weeks that Samir put into researching this topic served him.
Premise number 1. According to the Quran, Al-Qarnayn is a righteous believer, almost a prophet of Allah even, praised mightily as God's servant. Premise number 2. We know Al-Qarnayn is Alexander the Great. Premise number 3. We now know that Alex is a pagan, maybe even a homosexual, although evidence is not as strong about this. But he definitely was not a monotheist. Neither a Christian, Jew, nor a Muslim. He was an idol worshipper, a pagan. Therefore, the Quran is wrong. Done. Checkmate. It's over.
Okay, time for the evidence. Remember, Samir is presenting to you weeks of research.
But what's the evidence that Al-Qarnayn is Alex? This was provided by the scholar Wallace Budge in 1896. A large amount of similarities between the stories indicates that the two either share a common source or that the Quran is copied from the Alexander Syriac romance.
Or, The Alexander legend is copying the Quran. For those that aren't aware, the Alexander legend in its current form is from an 18th century manuscript. Yes, 11 centuries after the Quran. Reinink generously gives this work a very early date of around the year 630 after Hijrah. And even with this date, the chapter of Al-Kahf, which includes Dhul-Qarnayn, predates the Alexander legend by 8 years, since the chapter was revealed before the migration to Medina. You knew that, Samir, right? I mean, you put in weeks of research into this. Anything else, Samir?
Not to mention, Dhul-Qarnayn means two horns, which Alex is known as possessing.
There are multiple reports from Ali bin Abi Talib himself denying that Dhul-Qarnayn had horns. The reports mention that he was attacked on the Qarnayn, meaning the two sides of his head, and hence the name. Come on, Samir, you can do better.
Here's a list of early Islamic scholars who identified Dhul-Qarnayn as Alexander the Great. The Sirat Rasulullah of Ibn Ishaq.
What? Do you not... Have you... You've never heard of Sirat ibn Ishaq? Seriously?
Here's a list of early Islamic scholars who identified Dhul-Qarnayn as Alexander the Great. The Sirat Rasulullah of Ibn Ishaq mentions that Dhul-Qarnayn was of Egyptian and Greek origins, a pretty good description of Alexander, who came from Macedonia in Greece and conquered Egypt. This is 761 CE.
And this is where Samir shows his incompetence once again. Is it so hard to look up what you're quoting? What does Ibn Ishaq say? He quotes foreigners that said that Dhul-Qarnayn was from Egypt and his name was Marzuban ibn Mardhuba al-Yunani. That doesn't really sound like Alexander the son of Philip. He then provides a quote from Umar that implies that Dhul-Qarnayn was an angel. Ibn Ishaq ultimately says, and Allah knows best as to which of these he was. In other words, Ibn Ishaq isn't even making a claim. He's just relating some opinions.
Tafsir al-Jalalain.
I'm not really sure how Tafsir al-Jalalain is an early source, but I mean, whatever. Now, personally, I don't know who Dhul-Qarnayn is. I don't believe there's conclusive evidence for who he is. I do know for a fact that the orthodox opinion isn't that he's Alexander the Great. From the early days of Islam, scholars have differed in regards to the identity of Dhul-Qarnayn. And as I've demonstrated, the most orthodox opinion is that he wasn't Alexander. Keep one thing in mind. Not knowing who Dhul-Qarnayn is doesn't affect Muslims, it doesn't affect Islam. It doesn't change anything. And I'm just keeping it real here. The main reason I made this video is to show Abdullah Samir's incompetence. And Samir, remember.
I am a scholar, you are a donkey.
Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.